The smell of fried dough and cheap beer hung thick in the evening air as Founders Fest kicked into full swing. I was reaching for my wallet to buy Sophie a funnel cake when she grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my jacket sleeve. "Don't talk to me at this party," she hissed, her voice barely audible over the carnival music. "You're embarrassing me." I looked down at my wife of 12 years, this woman I'd built a life with, bought a house with, shared dreams with. Her perfectly styled blonde hair caught the glow from the string lights, but her green eyes were ice cold. Behind her, I could see her sister Madison smirking, arms crossed over her designer jacket, like she was watching her favorite reality show. "Embarrassing you," I repeated, genuinely confused. "Sophie, what are you talking about?" "Your shirt, Eli. Your stupid jokes with the neighbors. The way you laugh too loud at everything." She glanced back at Madison, who nodded approvingly. "Just stay away from me tonight, okay? I'm trying to network at a small-town carnival in coastal Maine." "Right." I felt something cold settle in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "You know what, Sophie? You're absolutely right." Her eyebrows shot up. She'd been expecting a fight. "I am embarrassing," I continued, loud enough for Madison to hear. "Embarrassing that I married someone who treats her husband like a diseased dog at a public event. You want me to stay away? Done." I turned and walked toward the exit, leaving her standing there with her mouth hanging open. The crowd parted around me as I made my way through the festival grounds, past the ring toss and the cotton candy stand, past our neighbors, the Kowalskis, who waved cheerfully until they saw my expression. My phone buzzed before I even reached my car. "Where did you go, Sophie?" I typed back. "Somewhere I'm not embarrassing." Then I blocked her number. The drive home took exactly 7 minutes. 7 minutes to process 12 years of marriage, dissolving into whatever the hell that was. Our house sat on Maple Street, a restored 1920s colonial that we'd spent 3 years renovating together. Sophie had insisted on the expensive kitchen renovation, the hardwood floors, the perfect paint colors that cost more per gallon than most people spend on groceries. I parked in our driveway and sat there for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. Through the living room window, I could see the bookshelf we'd built together, the couch where we used to watch movies, the framed photo from our wedding day. Sophie in white, me in my best suit, both of us grinning like idiots. That man in the photo wouldn't recognize the woman who just humiliated him in public. I went inside and methodically packed my things. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the woodworking tools from the basement workshop. Everything fit into 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. 12 years, reduced to luggage. The house keys went on the kitchen counter next to a note. "Congrats, the guest room's all yours now, E." My phone had 17 missed calls from Sophie by the time I checked into the Harbor Inn downtown. I deleted them all without listening. Instead, I called my business partner Vikram. "Eli? It's almost midnight, man. Everything okay? Remember that London contract we discussed? The 6-month cybersecurity consultation?" "Yeah, but I thought you said Sophie didn't want to move overseas." "Sophie's not part of the equation anymore. Can you call them tomorrow? Tell them I'm interested." Silence on the other end. Then, "Jesus, Eli, what happened?" "My wife happened. Or rather, my ex-wife happened." I hung up and opened my laptop. If Sophie wanted to network, she was about to learn what real networking looked like. I spent the next hour crafting an email to TechCrunch, one of the biggest technology blogs in the world. The subject line read, "How my divorce freed me to build a cybersecurity empire." The article was perfect, professional, inspiring, just personal enough to be compelling. I talked about toxic relationships holding back entrepreneurs, about the freedom that comes from cutting dead weight, about how sometimes the best business decision is the hardest personal one. I never mentioned Sophie by name, but anyone who knew us would connect the dots. I hit send at 1:47 a.m. By morning, my phone was exploding. Not with calls from Sophie this time, but with interview requests, job offers, and congratulations from colleagues who'd apparently been waiting years for me to dump my difficult wife. The TechCrunch piece had gone viral, shared thousands of times across LinkedIn and Twitter. The London job came through by noon. 6 months, consulting fee that was triple my usual rate. Start date next Monday. I was packing my rental car when Sophie's Mercedes screeched into the hotel parking lot. She jumped out wearing yesterday's dress, her perfect hair now a rat's nest, mascara smudged under her eyes. "Eli, what the hell is this?" She waved her phone at me. "Everyone's talking about your stupid article." My mother called me crying. My boss wants to see me first thing Monday. Sounds like a personal problem, I said, loading my laptop bag into the trunk. You can't just leave. We're married. We have a house, a life together. Had, I corrected. Past tense. You made it pretty clear last night that being associated with me was beneath your standards. I was just, Madison said. She trailed off, realizing how pathetic that sounded. Madison said what? That your husband of 12 years wasn't good enough to be seen with? That the man who paid for half that house you love so much was embarrassing you? I slammed the trunk shut. Well, congratulations, Sophie. You're embarrassment-free now. I got in the car and drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I watched her get smaller and smaller until she disappeared entirely. The flight to London left from Boston at 6 p.m. I had just enough time to stop by Ray's place and give him the spare key to my storage unit. Ray was my cousin, ex-Boston PD, now running a small private investigation business in Portland. He'd always hated Sophie. About damn time, he said when I explained the situation. That woman's been poisoned since day one. Remember your wedding? She spent the whole reception complaining about the flowers. Well, I need you to keep an eye on things while I'm gone, I told him. Sophie's going to try something. She always does when she doesn't get her way. Ray nodded, understanding. What kind of something? Well, I don't know yet, but when she does, I want to be ready. 6 months in London changed everything. The consulting job was a massive success, leading to 3 more contracts and a permanent position offer I was seriously considering. I'd lost 20 pounds, started running again, and discovered that I actually enjoyed being alone. No more walking on eggshells, no more apologizing for existing, no more Madison's snide comments over Sunday dinner, but I wasn't ready to disappear completely. Ray had been sending me updates, and they were fascinating. Week 3. Sophie's been asking around town about divorce lawyers, expensive ones. Week 7. Saw her at Murphy's bar with some guy in a suit. Didn't look like business. Week 12. The guy's name is Derek Fallon, real estate developer, divorced last year. Drives a red Porsche like he's compensating for something. Week 18. They're not being subtle anymore. His car was parked in your driveway overnight twice this week. Week 24. Mabel Henderson says Sophie's been telling people you abandoned her, playing the victim card hard. Mabel Henderson was our 78-year-old neighbor, a retired librarian who knew everything that happened within a 5-block radius. She'd always liked me, mainly because I helped her with her computer and didn't charge her for it. I flew back to Maine on a Friday in October, 6 months to the day after I'd left. The leaves were turning, painting the coastal town in brilliant reds and golds. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, it felt like returning to a crime scene. Ray picked me up at the airport, grinning as he loaded my bags into his truck. You look good, man. London agrees with you. Thanks. Fill me in on everything. Derek Fallon's a piece of work, Ray said, as we drove through downtown. 42 years old, owns Fallon Development. Built those ugly condos down by the marina. Divorced his wife last year after she caught him cheating. Guy's got a reputation. What kind of reputation? The kind where married women suddenly discover their husbands are emotionally unavailable, right around the time Derek shows up with his checkbook and his sports car. Ray turned onto Harbor Street. Sophie's not his first married conquest. We drove past Murphy's bar, a dive that had been serving the same crowd for 30 years. Through the window, I could see the usual suspects: fishermen, construction workers, and a few office types slumming it for authenticity. That's where they meet, Ray said. Every Tuesday and Thursday. Sophie tells people she's at book club. Book club, I repeated. Creative. Gets better. Derek's been bragging to his buddies about his classy older woman. Apparently, Sophie's been feeding him stories about how you were abusive, controlling, financially manipulative. Real sob story stuff. Something cold and familiar settled in my chest. The same feeling I'd had at the festival, but sharper now, more focused. How do you know all this? Ray grinned. Bartender at Murphy's is my ex-partner's nephew. Kid hears everything, remembers everything, and really doesn't like rich guys who tip badly and treat waitresses like garbage. We pulled into the parking lot of the Harbor Inn, where I'd booked another room. I could have stayed at the house. Technically, I still owned half of it, but I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. What's your plan? Ray asked. Information gathering, I said. Sophie wants to play victim, Let's see how that works out when people know the truth. Over the next week, I conducted what I like to call social reconnaissance. Lunch with our old neighbors, drinks with former mutual friends, casual conversations with people who'd known us as a couple. The picture that emerged was fascinating and infuriating in equal measure. Sophie had been busy rewriting history. According to her version of events, I'd been emotionally distant, financially controlling, and had abandoned her without warning. She was the long-suffering wife who'd finally found happiness with a man who appreciated her. The problem with Sophie's story was that she'd forgotten how small towns work. People talk, and they remember everything. She came to my book club last month, said Janet Morrison, our former neighbor. Spent the whole time complaining about how you never supported her career, never wanted to travel, never this, never that. But Janet, I remember when you got that promotion 3 years ago. Sophie threw you a party, invited half the neighborhood. She was so proud. And the travel thing is bullshit, added Carol Peterson, Janet's sister. You two went to Italy for your anniversary 2 years ago. Sophie posted about 50 photos on Facebook. The financial control narrative was particularly rich, considering that I'd been the one pushing Sophie to pursue her MBA, had paid for half of it, and had never once questioned her spending habits. Even when she'd blown $3,000 on a handbag she'd used exactly twice. But the most interesting information came from Derek's ex-wife, Patricia Fallon. And I found her at the farmer's market on Saturday morning, selling homemade soaps from a small booth. She was attractive in a natural way that was the complete opposite of Sophie's high-maintenance aesthetic. When I introduced myself, her face went through several expressions before settling on sympathetic understanding. "You're Sophie Manning's husband," she said. It wasn't a question. Ex-husband, technically, though the divorce isn't final yet. Patricia nodded knowingly. Derek has a type. Married, successful, looking for excitement. He's very good at making women feel special, like they deserve better than what they have. How long were you married? 15 years. I thought we were happy. She rearranged some lavender soap bars, not meeting my eyes. Then he started working late, going to networking events, taking weekend trips for business. Classic stuff. I was stupid enough to believe him until I found the hotel receipts. I'm sorry. Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me. She gestured to her booth, her simple clothes, the genuine smile that had replaced whatever mask she'd worn as Derek's wife. I got half his assets in the divorce, including some very interesting financial information that his business partners might find fascinating. She handed me a bar of soap that smelled like pine and sea salt. This one's on the house, and if you ever want to compare notes about our respective exes, I'm usually here on Saturdays. I walked away with more than soap. Patricia had given me something much more valuable: perspective. Derek Fallon wasn't just a homewrecker. He was a predator with a pattern. And Sophie was just his latest victim. Except Sophie wasn't really a victim. She was a willing participant who'd thrown away 12 years of marriage for a man who collected wives like trophies. That night, I sat in my hotel room and made a list. Not a revenge list. I wasn't some movie villain plotting elaborate schemes. Just a simple accounting of facts, timeline, and resources. Sophie wanted to rewrite our history? Fine. But she'd forgotten that I was the one with the technical skills, the methodical mind, and the patience to play the long game. She'd also forgotten that in small towns, the truth has a way of surfacing whether you want it to or not. Tuesday night at Murphy's bar was exactly as Ray had described. I sat in my rental car across the street, watching Sophie's Mercedes pull into the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. She'd dressed up for the occasion. Black dress, heels, the expensive jewelry I'd bought her for our 10th anniversary. Derek's red Porsche was already there, parked in the back corner like he was trying to be discreet. Amateur move. In a town this size, everyone noticed a car like that. I waited 30 minutes, then walked into Murphy's like I owned the place. The bar was exactly as I remembered. Dim lighting, sticky floors, the smell of fried food and stale beer. The kind of place Sophie used to call beneath us when we were married. They were in a corner booth, Derek's hand covering Sophie's across the table. She was laughing at something he'd said, that fake laugh she used when she wanted something. I'd heard it 1,000 times during our marriage, usually directed at her boss or some client she was trying to impress. I ordered a beer from Tommy, the bartender Ray had mentioned. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're Manning, right?" he said quietly, sliding the bottle across the bar. "Ray's cousin?" "That's right." "Thought so. You look like him around the eyes." Tommy glanced toward the corner booth. Your wife's been coming in here twice a week for about 4 months now, always with the same guy. Ex-wife, I corrected. And yeah, I know about Derek. Guy's a real piece of work. Tips like shit. Snaps his fingers at the waitresses. Acts like he's doing us a favor by drinking here. Tommy wiped down a glass, his movements casual. Last week he was bragging to his buddy about how he's gonna flip your house once the divorce goes through. Apparently your wife promised him half the equity. That was news to me. And legally impossible, since Sophie's name wasn't on the deed. I'd bought the house before we were married, though she'd certainly acted like she owned it. What else has he been saying? Lot of stuff about you being controlling, abusive, the usual bullshit cheaters tell themselves to feel better. But here's the thing. I've lived in this town my whole life. I know who the assholes are, and you were never one of them. I was about to respond when Sophie's laugh got louder. She'd spotted me at the bar and was putting on a show, leaning closer to Derek, touching his arm, making sure I could see exactly how happy she was. Derek followed her gaze, and our eyes met. He was handsome in a generic way, the kind of guy who spent too much money on hair products and thought expensive clothes made him interesting. When he saw me watching, he actually smirked and pulled Sophie closer. That was his first mistake. I finished my beer, left a 20 on the bar, and walked over to their booth. Hello, Sophie. She looked up at me with those green eyes I'd once thought were beautiful. Now they just looked calculating. Eli, I heard you were back in town, just visiting, wrapping up some business. I looked at Derek, who was trying to project confidence but couldn't quite hide the nervousness in his eyes. You must be Derek Fallon. I've heard a lot about you. All good, I hope, Derek said, extending his hand like we were meeting at a country club. I didn't take it. Actually, no. But I'm sure you've heard a lot about me too. Also, probably not good, considering the source. Sophie's cheeks flushed. Eli, don't make a scene. A scene? Like the scene you made at Founders Fest? Or the scene you've been making all over town, telling people I was abusive? I kept my voice conversational, but loud enough for nearby tables to hear. That's an interesting story, Sophie. Very creative. I never said you were abusive, she said, but her eyes darted away. Really? Because Janet Morrison seems to think otherwise. So does Carol Peterson, and about half the people at your book club. I turned to Derek. Has she told you about the book club yet? It's fascinating fiction. Derek's confidence was cracking. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Sophie and I are just friends. Friends, I repeated. Is that what you call it when you park your car in another man's driveway overnight? Interesting friendship. The bar had gotten quieter. People were pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Sophie realized it too, and her voice dropped to a hiss. You have no right to spy on me. Spy? Sophie, you live on a street with 78-year-old Mabel Henderson. You might as well have been broadcasting on the local news. I looked back at Derek. Speaking of broadcasting, how's Patricia doing? Your ex-wife? She seems much happier these days. Derek's face went white. You talked to Patricia. Lovely woman. Very insightful about your patterns. She mentioned something about financial irregularities that came out during your divorce. Something about client funds being misappropriated? That was a bluff. But Derek's reaction told me I'd hit close to something. He stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his drink. We're leaving, he said to Sophie. But Sophie wasn't done. She'd had just enough wine to be reckless, and 12 years of marriage had taught me to recognize that particular glint in her eyes. You think you're so smart, she said, standing to face me. Coming back here with your little investigation, trying to embarrass me. But everyone knows what you really are, Eli. Everyone knows you're a pathetic loser who couldn't keep his wife happy. The bar was dead silent now. Even the jukebox seemed to have stopped mid-song. You're right, I said calmly. I couldn't keep you happy. But then again, I don't think anyone could. Happiness requires gratitude, and you've never been grateful for anything in your life. Sophie's hand moved before I saw it coming, but 12 years of marriage had also taught me to anticipate her reactions. I caught her wrist before the slap connected, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her. Don't, I said quietly. You've embarrassed yourself enough for one night. Numb. I released her wrist and stepped back. Sophie stood there, shaking with rage, while Derek looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. This isn't over, Sophie said. Yes, it is, I replied. It's been over since the night you told me not to talk to you at a party. You just didn't realize it yet. I walked out of Murphy's bar and didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear the low murmur of conversation starting up again, and I knew that by morning, half the town would know exactly what had happened. Sophie wanted to control the narrative. She'd just lost that battle in the most public way possible. The next morning brought consequences faster than I'd expected. I was having coffee at the Harbor Diner when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my lawyer's office in Boston. Ely, it's Margaret Chen. I just got off the phone with Sophie's attorney. She's filing for an emergency restraining order, claiming you threatened her and her boyfriend in a public place. I almost laughed. Margaret, there were 30 witnesses at Murphy's bar last night. Half of them probably have cell phone video. Sophie tried to slap me, not the other way around. That's not how her lawyer is spinning it. They're claiming you've been stalking her, harassing her friends, and making threats against her new relationship. They want you barred from coming within 500 feet of her, or the house. The house I own. The house you own but abandoned for 6 months while living overseas. Eli, I need you to be very careful here. Restraining orders are easy to get and hard to fight, especially when there's a sympathetic woman involved. After hanging up with Margaret, I sat in the diner booth and considered my options. Sophie was escalating, which meant she was scared. People only got restraining orders when they knew they were losing control of the situation. My phone buzzed with a text from Ray. Meet me at the marina. Bring coffee. I found him sitting on a bench overlooking the harbor, watching the fishing boats head out for the day. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of salt and seaweed. Heard about last night, he said as I handed him a coffee. Tommy called me around midnight. Said you handled yourself well. Sophie's filing for a restraining order. Ray nodded like he'd been expecting it. Standard playbook for cheating wives. Make the husband look like the aggressor. Get him out of the picture legally. Then clean up in divorce court. Except I'm not playing by the standard rules. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. Remember when I said I was good at my job? Cybersecurity isn't just about protecting systems, Ray. It's about understanding how information flows, how people communicate, how digital footprints tell stories. The screen showed a detailed timeline I'd been building for weeks. Credit card transactions, GPS data from Sophie's phone. She'd never changed the family plan password. Social media posts, even the metadata from photos she'd been sharing. This is everything, I said. Every lie she's told, every place she's been, every dollar she's spent on her affair. All of it legal, all of it obtained through information she voluntarily shared or accounts she gave me access to during our marriage. Ray studied the timeline, whistling low. Jesus, Eli. She's been planning this for months. Look at this. She started seeing a divorce lawyer back in July, 2 months before you even came back from London. Gets better. See these transactions? She's been using our joint credit card to pay for hotel rooms, dinners, even bought Derek a watch last month. Technically, that's marital asset fraud. And this GPS data shows she's been lying about where she's been for months. Book club, work events, visiting her mother, all fabricated. She's been with Derek. Ray leaned back on the bench. So what's your play? Sophie wants a restraining order. Fine. But restraining orders work both ways. If she's claiming I'm dangerous, she can't very well continue living in my house, can she? That afternoon, I drove to the house on Maple Street for the first time since I'd left. Sophie's Mercedes wasn't in the driveway, but Derek's Porsche was parked on the street like he lived there. The sight of it sitting in front of my house, the house I'd bought and renovated and paid for, made something cold and sharp settle in my chest. I used my key. Sophie had never changed the locks, and walked into what used to be my home. The changes were subtle but unmistakable. Derek's jacket hanging in the front closet, men's toiletries in the guest bathroom, a bottle of expensive scotch I'd never bought sitting on the kitchen counter. I took photos of everything, methodically documenting the evidence that Derek had essentially moved into my house. Then I went to the basement workshop, my old sanctuary, and retrieved something I'd hidden there months ago. A small digital recorder I'd used to document Sophie's increasingly erratic behavior during the last year of our marriage. The recordings were devastating. Sophie screaming at me for imaginary slights, threatening to destroy my business relationships, admitting to lies she'd told her family about our marriage. Hours of audio that painted a very different picture than the victim narrative she was now selling. I was uploading the files to a secure server when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Through the basement window, I could see Sophie's Mercedes and Derek's Porsche. They were back. What the hell is this? Sophie's voice carried down from the kitchen. She'd found the legal papers Margaret had filed that morning. A counter petition for the restraining order. along with a motion to have Derek removed from the marital home. I walked upstairs to find them both in the living room. Sophie was holding the papers, her face flushed with anger. Derek looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "You can't kick us out," Sophie said. "This is my house, too." "Actually, it's not," I said calmly. "It's my house. I bought it before we were married. It's in my name only, and you've been letting your boyfriend live here rent-free for months. That's called conversion of marital assets. I live here. I have rights. You have the right to live here as my wife. But since you've made it clear that our marriage is over, and since you're claiming I'm dangerous enough to need a restraining order against, I think it's best if you find somewhere else to stay." Derek finally found his voice. "Look, Manning, we don't want any trouble. Maybe we can work something out." "Work something out?" I looked at him with genuine curiosity. "You've been screwing my wife in my house, using my utilities, eating my food, and now you want to negotiate? That's fascinating." "Ely, don't be an asshole," Sophie snapped. "An asshole? Sophie, I've been the picture of restraint. I could have had you both arrested for trespassing. I could have changed the locks months ago. I could have turned off the utilities you've been using to fund your little love nest." I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. "Instead, I've been documenting everything, every lie, every transaction, every night Derek's car was parked in my driveway. You want to play victim in court? Let's see how that works when the judge sees this." Sophie's face went white as she scrolled through the timeline. "You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference." I looked at Derek. "How much did she tell you about our finances? Did she mention that the house is worth about $400,000 and she has no legal claim to it? Did she mention that I make twice what she does, so she's not getting alimony? Did she mention that adultery affects asset division in Maine?" Derek was already moving toward the door. "Sophie, maybe we should go." "Don't you dare leave," Sophie said. But Derek was already reaching for his jacket. "I'm not getting involved in this mess," he said. "Call me when you get your shit sorted out." He left without looking back, and I almost felt sorry for Sophie as she watched her knight in shining armor abandon her at the first sign of real conflict. "Congratulations," I said. "You traded 12 years of marriage for a guy who runs away the moment things get complicated." Sophie turned on me with fury I'd never seen before. "You bastard! You manipulative, controlling bastard! I should have left you years ago." "You should have," I agreed. "But you didn't, because you liked the house and the lifestyle and the financial security. You just wanted to have your cake and eat it too." "I loved him." "You loved the idea of him. The excitement, the validation, the feeling of being desired by someone new. But love? Sophie, you don't even know what that word means." She started to cry then, not the manipulative tears she used to get her way, but real, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Pack your things," I said quietly. "You have until tomorrow morning. After that, I'm changing the locks." I left her standing in the living room of the house we'd once shared, crying over the ruins of the life she'd thrown away for a man who'd already moved on to his next conquest. The next morning, Sophie's car was gone. She'd taken her clothes, her jewelry, and several items that technically belonged to both of us, but I didn't care. I changed the locks, had the utilities transferred back to my name only, and started the process of reclaiming my life. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following week, but it never happened. Sophie's lawyer withdrew the petition after Margaret presented our evidence package. Turns out it's hard to claim someone is stalking you when the evidence shows you've been systematically defrauding them for months. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Sophie got her clothes, her car, and a small settlement that covered her contribution to the house renovations. Everything else, the house, the business, the savings account she'd been planning to split with Derek, stayed with me. I saw her once more, at the grocery store in January. She looked tired, older, like the last year had aged her 5 years. She was alone, pushing a cart through the produce section of the life she'd once thought was beneath her. She saw me too, and for a moment we just looked at each other across the apples and oranges. Then she turned and walked away without saying a word. I heard through the small-town grapevine that Derek had moved on to a married woman from the next town over, some doctor's wife with more money and fewer complications than Sophie had turned out to be. Sophie was living in a small apartment downtown, working the same job, driving the same car, but without the house or the husband or the future she'd thrown away. I could have felt vindicated. I could have felt satisfied that justice had been served, that the woman who'd humiliated me and betrayed me had gotten exactly what she deserved. Instead, I just felt tired. 6 months later, I moved back to London permanently. The cybersecurity firm offered me a partnership, and I accepted. I sold the house on Maple Street to a young couple with 2 kids and a dog. People who would fill it with laughter and love instead of resentment and lies. I never saw Sophie again, but I heard she eventually moved away too, chasing some new opportunity in a city where nobody knew her story. Maybe she learned something from the experience. Maybe she didn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. The last thing I did before leaving Maine was stop by Patricia Fallon's booth at the farmer's market. She was still selling soap, still smiling that genuine smile that had nothing to do with getting what she wanted from other people. "Heard you're moving to London," she said, handing me a bar of that pine and sea salt soap. "News travels fast in small towns." It does. Also heard Sophie and Derek didn't work out. Shocking development. Patricia laughed. "You know what the best part of divorce is? It's not the freedom, though that's nice. It's not even getting half their stuff, though that helps. It's realizing that the person you thought you couldn't live without was actually the person preventing you from really living." She was right. For 12 years, I'd been trying to make Sophie happy, trying to be the husband she wanted, trying to fix problems that couldn't be fixed because they weren't really problems, they were just who she was. Now I was free to be who I actually was, instead of who someone else needed me to be. I kept that bar of soap for years, long after it was too small to use. It sat on my bathroom counter in London, a reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well.